There's something that is being ignored with regards to the internal politics within Iran, within the Islamic Republic, because of the talks in Islamabad between United States and the Islamic Republic. A lot of people are following that dynamic and the terms from each side and whether or not a deal is possible, but they're missing what's happening inside Iran between different fragments of the Islamic Republic. And I think most analysts are underestimating how influential that is and how the internal politics of the Islamic Republic is what's going to determine how all of this ends. As we're speaking, there's two internal power struggles that are happening. There's something like a coup that is happening, what I call the boots against the turbans. But there's another semi-coup happening as well. There's a second power struggle that is happening as well. So let's focus on the first one, and then we'll go to the one that is being even more ignored. As I've already mentioned this for a couple of years now, there has been a slow shift from the mullahs to IRGC for a couple of years now in the Islamic Republic. And we already had predicted that with the death of Ali Khamenei, that transition will speed up. And we could see that happening already. This is the coup of the boots against the turbans that I've mentioned. And this is also exactly why we had predicted that IRGC will pick Mujtaba Khamenei as the next supreme leader. But why pick Mujtaba, and what does that have to do with the transition of power from the mullahs to the IRGC? Basically, the Islamic Republic is going through a transition from a theocracy to a military dictatorship. And again, I'm not saying the mullahs are not going to be influential. It's just going to be more that the mullahs will be serving IRGC rather than how it originally was, which was IRGC serving the mullahs. So the reason why Mujtaba Khamenei was the ideal pick is because of his lack of religious credibility, lack of charisma, his inability to speak properly. And this is all even if he was alive and healthy. The IRGC wanted to have a supreme leader that they could completely control. And that's why they picked Mujtaba. You could see with the death of Ali Khamenei, the main decision makers are now people like Vahidi, like Zolghadr, Abdullahi. These are the remaining leaders of IRGC, and these are the main decision makers within the Islamic Republic right now. You might think that, what about Ghalibaf? But as we predicted, Ghalibaf is not the main decision maker within the Islamic Republic. We already mentioned that on our live show. And finally, this was confirmed by J.D. Vance after his negotiations in Islamabad with Ghalibaf. He came out and confirmed that Ghalibaf and all the people who were there were not the people who could actually give to the Americans what they wanted. Within IRGC, we have different camps as well that are competing against each other. We have the Vahidi camp, we have the Rezai camp, we have the Jafari camp. We also now have more reports that the Vahidi camp is now taking positions against the Ghalibaf camp and throwing him under the bus for even talking to the Americans, which again strengthens the theory that we had where Ghalibaf is trying to be more flexible to the Americans, and the Vahidi camp, the Vahidi is the head of IRGC, is representing a more inflexible, aggressive position against the Americans. The interesting thing that I observed that I didn't see anyone else discussing is that the hardline mullahs are now coming out and supporting Ghalibaf in favor of the negotiations and the ceasefire, which is quite interesting because you would expect the mullahs that are categorized as more of a hardliner to be aligned with the supporters of the Islamic Republic who are against negotiating with the Americans and against any form of a ceasefire, and they would want to continue the war against the United States. But why is it that people like Nabavian, which is from the Haidari camp, and somebody like Alam al-Huda, which has his own cult following and is considered extremely hardline, why is it that all of a sudden they came out and supported Ghalibaf? They come out and suggest that Ghalibaf has Mujtaba Khamenei's blessing. They come out and saying why these negotiations were necessary, why ceasefire made sense. Given that they are considered more hardline, you would think that they would be taking an anti-so-called reformist position, will be throwing Ghalibaf under the bus and categorizing what he's doing as a betrayal of the Islamic Republic and accusing him of being a Zionist spy or something like that. But we're seeing some of these mullahs actually supporting Ghalibaf. Well, it's the head of the IRGC that is taking a position against him. My theory here is that for these mullahs, Ghalibaf is their only hope against a complete takeover of the IRGC against the mullahs. The support that they have for Ghalibaf, and they're trying to give him legitimacy by putting words in Mujtaba's mouth and saying that he has Mujtaba's blessing, is because if Mujtaba's influence is completely eliminated and IRGC has full control, that means the mullah's influence is also being reduced to a minimum. It's interesting to see whether Mujtaba will finally wake up from his coma or if he's even alive or not, because the mullahs really need him right now to use him as a way to maintain some level of influence. So we'll see how that plays out. There's a lot of Iranians who are very much against these negotiations and any talk of ceasefire. They want to go back to Americans and Israelis bombing the crap out of different assets of the Islamic Republic and go back to killing IRGC leaders and politicians. However, now that we're looking at what's happening, I think this ceasefire and this negotiations between Americans and the Islamic Republic is hurting the Islamic Republic in a way that military operations could not. Because to defeat the Islamic Republic, taking out infrastructure or military assets or killing different officials, those are effective in different ways. However, it's not enough, and it doesn't hurt the Islamic Republic in the way that is fatal. Because the Islamic Republic, as long as it continues to have some form of oil and gas revenue, even if you reduce it, if it continues to have that, it will be able to continue to pay for mercenaries to suppress the Iranian people. And we know that we're not going to have any regime change without the uprising of the Iranian people. This is why I always say that humiliation and internal division hurts the Islamic Republic more than any form of military operations could. You could see that regime supporters continue to believe that they're winning this fight against the Americans and Israelis. All of this destruction, all of the heads of IRGC dying, Ali Khamenei dying, the Islamic Republic losing most of its navy, most of its air force, most of its air defense, none of that convinced these people that they're losing. As long as they could convince the regime supporters that everything is okay, then things will work out for the Islamic Republic. What we need for the Islamic Republic to fall is to demotivate, demoralize, humiliate, and divide the followers of the Islamic Republic. This is why the negotiations and the attempt for ceasefires has basically turned different elements of the Islamic Republic against each other, and also the supporters of the Islamic Republic against the Islamic Republic. No amount of missiles could achieve this, and the ceasefire and the negotiations did. This is why the Islamic Republic followers are afraid of humiliation more than death, because humiliation could destroy them in a way that killing regime officials can't. In our live streams, we have shown you many examples of regime supporters turning against the Islamic Republic, especially against Ghalibaf and IRGC, because of them talking to the killers of Ali Khamenei. The way that you need to look at this is that the more the anti-regime Iranians are united, and the more the pro-regime Iranians are divided, the closer we're going to get to a regime collapse. This is why Prince Reza Pahlavi is very important, because he's the main uniter of the anti-regime Iranians. Going to the second conflict that I'm talking about, the Islamic Republic versus the Iranians who support the Islamic Republic. We might see the Islamic Republic itself, especially the IRGC, suppressing not just Iranian people who are anti-regime, but the Iranian people who are pro-regime as well. Because the Islamic Republic has created this monster that is now limiting what they can do. They have created the delusion that the Islamic Republic is all-powerful and that is constantly winning. It has fed them this victory narrative to the regime followers over and over again as a way to gain support and legitimacy from them, by showing them that they're strong against Zionists, against imperialist West, and all of that, by being the only defender of Palestine. This constant feeding of victory narrative to regime followers has made them addicted to this and has made them dependent on these victory narratives to believe in the legitimacy of the Islamic Republic. So this has reduced the flexibility of the Islamic Republic because any signs of capitulating will mean that all of this is fake. When Ali Khamenei was alive, we had two ways to deal with this. Whenever the Islamic Republic had to capitulate or backtrack or basically bend the knee to the Americans or the Israelis, there was two strategies. Either Ali Khamenei will give a sermon to try to sell this defeat as a victory. Many of them will buy it because it's Ali Khamenei. Or they will somehow blame it on the so-called reformers, and the reformers knew that was their purpose. They will come and they will take the bullets for Ali Khamenei. Now we don't have any of these mechanisms. Ali Khamenei is not there to keep the whole regime united and convince these people why they're still winning. And reformers have been completely sidelined. IRGC is still the foreign minister. Ghalibaf, who is not considered to be a so-called reformer, was also there doing the negotiations. And that's why you could see so many of the chants of regime supporters were against Ghalibaf as well. My suspicion is that even within IRGC, there are leaders there that want to be more flexible to the Americans because otherwise they will lose everything. But they can't because they will lose all legitimacy from the followers of the Islamic Republic. And this is quite annoying. So my guess is that within IRGC, there is this attempt, there's this desire to shut the regime supporters up as well and then force upon them a higher level of flexibility. And this is why I think the proxies, the Shia terrorist militia groups that they're bringing in from Iraq, from Pakistan, and from Afghanistan, Hashishabi from Iraq, Fatimian from Afghanistan, and Zainabian from Pakistan, they're bringing them into Iran not just to suppress anti-regime Iranians, but also to eventually force whatever the IRGC wants to do upon the pro-regime as well and shut them up as well. As long as the IRGC can pay these mercenaries, because the benefit of these mercenaries, these Shia militia groups from outside, is that they are not as annoying as the regime supporters inside Iran. They don't have this whole political agenda. As long as they're paid, they will you point to where they need to shoot and they will shoot. Even within IRGC, there are many people who, if you give them to command to shoot into crowds of Iranian people, a lot of them will hesitate. But if you're bringing foreigners, they don't hesitate. And as long as you have the US dollars that you're making from oil and gas, you could keep paying these mercenaries and you could maintain control. I wouldn't be surprised if there are even people within IRGC who are thinking, let's just give up. Let's just give Americans what they want and come up with a deal with them so that they could keep us in power. And then we will keep our oil and gas revenue, pay mercenaries, and shut everyone up with them, and basically suppress anybody who's against us. And this will be then a complete military dictatorship of the IRGC, and they will dominate the mullahs, the anti-regime people, and the pro-regime people. If that ends up being the calculation of the IRGC, there's going to be two problems with that. Even if the Americans tolerate such a deal, there are two groups of people who can't tolerate such a deal. One is the Israelis and the other is the Iranian people, the anti-regime Iranian people, which are the majority of the Iranian people. There's a limitation on both of these. So the Israelis are obviously really good at military operations and intelligence operations. However, they're sometimes limited by whether the United States will give them a green light to carry out certain operations or not. That's the main limitations of the Israelis. The main limitations of the Iranian people is that they're not armed. And because they're not armed, so much of these discussions does not include them. We're constantly talking about what the United States will do, what Israelis will do, what the IRGC will do, but many times the Iranian people are not included in these discussions because it's easier to dismiss them because they're not armed. And this is why I think the discussion of arming the Iranian people, not just with guns, but also with drones, needs to increase. If you want to talk directly to me about all of this, there's a link in the description to our discussion group. I'm there almost every day, so come talk to me there. Also, leave a comment. Let me know what you think, especially if you think that this was helpful and educational. Those type of comments, when I read them, when you tell me that you learned something, when I read those comments, it really motivates me to make more videos like this. And yeah, that's it. My name is Armin Navabi. I'm Israel Chai. Long live America. Javid Shah. Payandeira.